In February 2018, I was at a library in Houston. It was not the library downtown, and I composed a strategy. It was a strategy specifically in an attempt to do two things. First of all, if there was going to be any legitimate reconciliation of what was at that point going on in connection with bond fraud on a very large level, including bond fraud that impacted the national economies of other countries that at that time were being sanctioned, then one of the manners in which that had to be addressed was through a meaningful consideration of how it was that national economies were allowed to be impacted by the fraudulent underwriting and contract terms associated with those bonds to begin with. And that part of that had to do with concepts of financial characterization, including illegal underwriting and other manners. And at the time, the strategy I had identified had to do with considerations of healthcare and the farce that was the Affordable Care Act when it came to a process of financial engineering that was masquerading under the auspices of healthcare. That would also have included a consideration of forced cybernetics and manners in which people were being impacted biophysiologically in connection with the outroll of technologies associated with the digital economy. The specific strategy identified a process whereby individual states, under the authority of their state constitutions, in consideration of the manners in which they first attempted to confront the Affordable Care Act or address matters related to the outroll of the Affordable Care Act based upon a concept of state marketplace, would then be able to do within their own state their own investigation based on constitutional adherence to see if there had been any sort of replication of the sort of pattern of racketeering activity that had been ongoing and that had occurred in Texas. Something comparable had happened in their states, and then to see if there was a way to coordinate that with federal charges in order to understand the implications of the terms on which it was identified. Was it something that had come from the federal level and was promulgated onto the state level through some sort of intentional abuse of executive processes, either on the state level or the federal level? Or was it another manner in which certain states attempted to address it and then were obstructed from being able to engage constitutionally with their own processes because of a compulsion that was coming from a federal mandate? These were things that were supposed to be addressed on a state by state basis and would have respected consistent standards related to separation of federal and state constitutional processes. And the specifics around this was an understanding that while the Affordable Care Act was legislated by the federal government, the intention was to create state based marketplaces, and that within the context of those state based marketplaces, there were supposed to be specific standards that different states engaged in terms of how they would fulfill the federal mandate. This could have potentially presented one possibility, but insofar as there was a possibility also for it to be a cover for crime, including crimes connected to mischaracterizing as healthcare insurance or as health treatment, things that were actually about engaging in acts of fraud, including acts of fraud that visited crime upon people, then the state had a specific responsibility in terms of how it engaged with the state based marketplace mandates. And the federal government had a certain responsibility in terms of what it was doing in assuring that whatever was coming from the federal level was itself constitutional before trying to pass the buck off onto certain states. This was the game plan I had come up with for myself and would have been very happy to have engaged other people with in February of 2018. This was before a variety of other things ended up happening in February of 2018. This was before I was trafficked out of Houston and to Austin, and then from Austin into Dallas, and then from Dallas to Fort Worth, and then from Fort Worth to back to Dallas. This was also before I contacted every state's attorney general. In the autumn of 2018, after the state of Texas engaged in an intentional manipulation of its own constitutional process regarding my state based legal efforts, and instead decided to present a case to the Supreme Court of the United States related to the Affordable Care Act. They had a different strategy. But in the course of that, what did become of my strategy? The only attorney general I heard back from was from a state that referred me to their mental health department. Now, it would have been relevant, actually. It would have been relevant to address a fraudulent diagnosis as mentally ill as retaliation from somebody, retaliation against somebody that was reporting on crimes that included acts of domestic terrorism and the murder of members of the military in the state of concern. That's not how it was addressed. And to this time, that's not how it was addressed. What happened to my legal strategy? Did somebody decide they were going to steal it along with my email and along with other aspects of my identity, including my reports that I had been attempting to file for years, and instead try to play the racket using biological weapons? How many states' attorneys generals are co-conspiring with a cover-up of the actual crimes that were committed with the Affordable Care Act marketplace and outrolling a digital economy that is using electronic warfare to activate biological weapons involving people in their state in order to exploit it for financial purposes? That's what's going on right now. This is what they are not revealing, and they're not prosecuting appropriately. COVID-19 is biological warfare. How's it being engaged? How's it being triggered? Why is nobody in an authoritative position in this country on a state or federal level acknowledging that we are at war? Is it because it's an internal operation? Is it because it literally has gotten to the point where narco cartels have infiltrated the government and organized crime has so saturated the public administrations that they are using biological warfare in order to intimidate and liquidate political opposition, and then trying to extort us into paying kickbacks to them in the privatization of the federal government into the largesses of select investment schemes and their affiliated corporations that are allowed to maintain an illusion of solvency while the rest of us, again, are supposed to be bankrupted? I do not any longer have a copy of that original legal strategy. I do not any longer have a copy of the revision I did in August through September of 2018. They stole that email. I no longer have a copy of all the emails I sent to all of these states' attorneys generals after late November, early December 2018. I no longer have a copy of the communications I had with the Attorney General of the state of Mississippi's office. I no longer have that. Somebody stole it. What did you do with it? How much was it worth?